The stadium buzzed with the electric energy of 70,000 fans, their collective roar washing over the concrete and steel structure like waves against a cliff. From the nosebleed seats, the players looked like colorful ants scurrying across a vibrant green field, while down below, beneath the thundering footsteps and spilled beer, existed another world entirely. A labyrinth of corridors, maintenance rooms, and service areas formed the beating heart of the stadium, a place most fans never knew existed, let alone thought about. Among these winding passageways and humming machinery, a single service door stood as the boundary between two worlds, the glorious spectacle above and the functional necessity below. Jake Matthews had worked beneath the stadium for nearly 3 years now. At 26, he hadn't exactly planned on becoming a maintenance technician for the city's largest sports venue, but the job paid well enough and offered benefits, something his art degree hadn't immediately provided. Jake knew every inch of the underbelly of this concrete beast. He could navigate the maze-like corridors with his eyes closed, identifying each mechanical room by the distinct pitch of its equipment or the particular smell of its environment. To Jake, this hidden world had become a second home, a place where he found a strange comfort in the constant hum of air handlers and the rhythmic dripping of condensation from cooling pipes. On this particular Saturday, as the championship game raged on above, Jake was checking the East Quadrant's electrical systems. The stadium was old, built in the late 80s, and despite numerous renovations, certain infrastructure elements remained temperamental, especially during high-demand events. Jake's radio crackled to life, interrupting his methodical inspection. "Matthews, we've got a specialist coming down to look at the East Quadrant transformer. Apparently, there's some concern about load capacity for tonight's post-game light show. Can you meet him at service entrance B and show him around?" Jake acknowledged the request and made his way to the service entrance, his steel-toed boots echoing against the concrete floor. He wasn't thrilled about babysitting some outside contractor who probably wouldn't understand the stadium's quirks and personality the way he did. These specialists typically arrived with their fancy equipment and theoretical knowledge, but lacked the practical experience that came from daily interaction with the building's systems. As Jake approached the service door, he saw a figure waiting. The man stood slightly taller than Jake, with broad shoulders and an easy posture that suggested confidence without arrogance. He wore dark jeans and a navy polo shirt with some tech company's logo embroidered on the chest. When he turned toward Jake, the overhead fluorescent lights caught his face, revealing warm brown eyes, a strong jawline softened by a hint of stubble, and an unexpectedly bright smile. "You must be Jake," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm Alex Chun from PowerSync Systems. Thanks for meeting me." Jake took his hand, noting the firm grip and the surprising warmth of Alex's palm against his. "Yeah, that's me. So you're here about the transformer?" Alex nodded, his eyes crinkling slightly at the corners when he smiled. "The venue manager is worried about power draw during the finale. I'm here to make sure we don't blow half the neighborhood into darkness when they crank up those new laser systems." There was something immediately disarming about Alex that caught Jake off guard. Most contractors he dealt with were either condescending or completely disinterested, but Alex seemed genuinely engaged and, more surprisingly, respectful of Jake's role. "Well, I can show you where everything is," Jake offered, trying to maintain his professional demeanor despite feeling an unexpected flutter in his stomach. "The East Quadrant is a bit of a maze, but I know it like the back of my hand." As Jake led Alex through the service corridors, he found himself becoming increasingly aware of the other man's presence behind him. The narrow passageways sometimes forced them to walk close together, their shoulders occasionally brushing in a way that sent an electric current through Jake's body. He tried to focus on explaining the layout of the electrical systems, pointing out recent upgrades and known issues, but he kept stumbling over his words whenever Alex's gaze met his. "So how long have you been working here?" Alex asked during a brief pause in Jake's technical explanation. "Almost 3 years now," Jake replied, grateful for the shift to easier conversation. "It wasn't exactly my life plan, but it's grown on me." Alex raised an eyebrow. "What was the plan then?" Jake rarely discussed his background with colleagues, let alone strangers, but something about Alex's genuine interest made him open up. "I studied fine arts in college. Painting, specifically. I thought I'd be the next great American artist, showing in galleries in New York and Paris. He laughed softly at his own naivety. Turns out, the world isn't exactly clamoring for another painter with more passion than connections. Do you still paint? Alex asked, his question lacking the usual pity or judgment Jake often encountered when revealing his artistic background. When I can find the time and energy, Jake admitted. I have a small studio set up in my apartment. Nothing fancy, but it keeps me sane. They reached the main electrical room, and Jake pushed open the heavy metal door. Inside, the space hummed with the sound of electricity flowing through massive transformers and distribution panels. Jake explained the setup to Alex, who listened attentively while examining the equipment with practiced eyes. What about you? Jake asked, watching as Alex connected diagnostic equipment to one of the panels. How'd you end up as a power systems specialist? Alex smiled without looking up from his work. My father was an electrician. I grew up helping him on job sites, learning how to respect electricity without fearing it. I was always fascinated by large-scale systems, how something invisible could power entire buildings, entire cities. He glanced up at Jake. I studied electrical engineering, but I prefer being in the field rather than sitting behind a desk. There's something satisfying about solving real-world problems, you know? Jake nodded, understanding completely. Despite his initial reluctance about his job, he'd come to appreciate the tangible nature of his work. Fixing things, making systems function properly, seeing immediate results from his efforts. As Alex continued his diagnostics, Jake found himself studying the other man's profile. There was something captivating about the way Alex worked. Confident movements, a slight furrow of concentration between his brows, the occasional smile when he discovered something interesting in the data. Jake caught himself staring and quickly looked away, busying himself with checking a nearby panel that didn't actually need attention. Everything okay over there? Alex asked, a hint of amusement in his voice that suggested he might have noticed Jake's gaze. Just double-checking some connections, Jake replied, feeling heat rise to his cheeks. Better safe than sorry. The next hour passed quickly as they moved through the electrical systems. What started as professional explanations gradually evolved into more personal conversation. Jake learned that Alex had moved to the city just 6 months ago, that he had a rescue dog named Edison, and that he shared Jake's love for obscure indie films. In turn, Jake found himself sharing stories about the strangest maintenance emergencies he'd encountered at the stadium, his favorite local coffee shop, and his ongoing battle with his landlord over a persistently leaky ceiling. Their easy conversation was interrupted by a sudden fluctuation in the lights. They dimmed momentarily before returning to full brightness, but the brief darkness was enough to make both men pause. That shouldn't happen, Jake said, immediately moving toward the main distribution panel. Especially not with the game still going on. Alex joined him, their shoulders touching as they both examined the system. Could be a momentary surge from above. Let me check the readings. As they worked side by side, Jake became acutely aware of their proximity. The faint scent of Alex's cologne, the warmth radiating from his body, the way their hands occasionally brushed as they reached for tools or switches. There was an undeniable tension building between them, something that transcended professional cooperation. The lights flickered again, more dramatically this time, and Jake's radio crackled with concerned voices from other areas of the stadium. Before either of them could react, the emergency system kicked in, bathing the room in the dim red glow of backup lighting. That's not good, Alex muttered, quickly scanning his diagnostic equipment. Looks like we're getting power fluctuations from the main utility feed. The backup generators should kick in for critical systems, but we need to isolate this section before it affects the whole stadium. Jake nodded, already moving toward the emergency protocols he'd been trained for but had rarely needed to implement. We need to manually override the East Quadrant distribution and reroute through the secondary systems. They worked in perfect synchronization, as if they'd been partners for years rather than acquaintances of a few hours. Jake was impressed by Alex's knowledge and quick thinking, while Alex seemed equally appreciative of Jake's intimate understanding of the stadium's systems. As they completed the emergency rerouting, Jake's radio came to life again. Matthews, status report. We're getting calls from all over the east side. Situation contained. Jake responded, glancing at Alex for confirmation. We've isolated the East Quadrant transformer and rerouted through secondary systems. The game shouldn't be affected, but we'll need to run on reduced power for non-essential areas until we can diagnose the root cause. Good work, came the reply. Keep me posted on any developments. As Jake clipped the radio back to his belt, he caught Alex watching him with an expression of admiration. What? Jake asked, suddenly self-conscious. Nothing, Alex replied with a small smile. Just impressed. You handled that like a pro. Just doing my job, Jake said, though he couldn't help feeling pleased by the compliment. The momentary crisis averted, they still needed to investigate the cause of the power fluctuations. This required accessing a service area even deeper in the stadium's infrastructure, a narrow mechanical room that housed some of the original electrical systems from the building's construction. This door sticks sometimes, Jake warned as they approached a heavy service door at the end of a particularly narrow corridor. You have to kind of pull and push at the same time. Together, they wrestled with the reluctant door until it finally gave way, swinging open to reveal a cramped room filled with electrical panels and junction boxes. They squeezed inside, the limited space forcing them to stand close together as they examined the equipment. I think I see the problem, Alex said after a few minutes of investigation. This relay is showing signs of arcing. It's probably been gradually failing for weeks, maybe months. Jake leaned in to see where Alex was pointing, their faces now inches apart. That would explain the minor issues we've been having. Nothing serious enough to trigger alarms, but enough to cause intermittent problems. As they discussed potential solutions, the heavy service door began to slowly swing shut behind them, a common occurrence with the aging door mechanism. Without thinking, Jake quickly moved to stop it, knowing they could potentially be trapped if it closed completely. In his haste, he found himself pressed between the door and Alex, using his back to hold the door open while facing the other man in the narrow space. Suddenly, the professional bubble that had surrounded their interaction burst. With Jake's back against the door and Alex standing directly in front of him, barely a breath apart, the air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. Jake became acutely aware of every sensation, the solid weight of the door against his back, the warmth of Alex's body so close to his, the subtle rise and fall of Alex's chest as he breathed. Jake began, his voice trailing off as he realized he had no idea what he should do. Move? Stay? The logical part of his brain knew he should step aside, return to their professional interaction, but something stronger kept him rooted in place. Alex's eyes, warm and questioning, held Jake's gaze. You should what? He asked softly, making no move to increase the distance between them. The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. Jake had never been one to take risks, especially not at work, especially not with someone he'd just met. Yet something about Alex made all his usual caution evaporate like morning dew under a hot sun. I don't know, Jake admitted honestly, his voice barely above a whisper. Alex's expression softened, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Can I tell you something? He asked, leaning slightly closer. I've been wanting to do this since you first walked up to me at the service entrance. Before Jake could process these words, Alex closed the remaining distance between them. The first touch of Alex's lips against his was gentle, questioning, giving Jake every opportunity to pull away. But pulling away was the furthest thing from Jake's mind as he responded to the kiss, his free hand moving to Alex's waist to steady himself, or perhaps to ensure that this moment, this person, wouldn't disappear like a dream upon waking. The kiss deepened, becoming more confident, more certain. Jake felt the cool metal of the door against his back, contrasting with the warmth of Alex pressed against his front. Time seemed to suspend itself in this hidden corner of the stadium. The roar of the crowd above reduced to a distant hum that could have been the blood rushing in Jake's ears. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Jake kept his eyes closed for a moment, afraid that opening them would somehow break the spell. When he did look at Alex, he found the other man watching him with a mixture of desire and uncertainty. Was that okay? Alex asked, his usual confidence momentarily wavering. Jake couldn't help but laugh softly. More than okay, he assured him. Unexpected, but definitely okay. Relief washed over Alex's features, followed quickly by a grin. Good. Because I've been trying to focus on transformers and load capacities for the past 3 hours, but all I could think about was whether your hair is as soft as it looks. As if to answer his own question, Alex ran his fingers through Jake's hair, sending a shiver down his spine. The moment was interrupted by Jake's radio crackling to life once more. "Matthews, what's the status on that East Quadrant issue?" Reality came rushing back as Jake fumbled for his radio. "Still diagnosing," he responded, trying to keep his voice professional despite the circumstances. "We've identified a failing relay that needs replacement. Working on a temporary fix now." "Copy that. Keep me updated." As Jake returned the radio to his belt, the absurdity of the situation hit him. Pressed against a service door, kissing a stranger in the bowels of a stadium while 70,000 people cheered obliviously above them. He couldn't help but laugh. "Something funny?" Alex asked, his own smile suggesting he understood the peculiarity of their situation. "Just thinking about how this wasn't exactly how I expected my day to go," Jake admitted. "I mean, I was just supposed to show you around the electrical systems." "Are you complaining?" Alex raised an eyebrow, his hand still resting lightly on Jake's waist. "Definitely not complaining," Jake assured him. "Just processing." They reluctantly separated, remembering the actual work that needed to be done. With the door properly secured open, they turned their attention back to the failing relay, working together to implement a temporary fix that would keep the system stable until a permanent replacement could be installed. As they worked, Jake found himself stealing glances at Alex, still not quite believing what had happened between them. Part of him wondered if this was just a momentary connection, a brief spark that would fizzle out once they left the intimate confines of the stadium's underbelly. Another part, a hopeful part he hadn't acknowledged in a long time, wondered if this could be the beginning of something more. "So," Alex said as they finished securing the temporary fix, his voice casual, though his eyes revealed more. "What happens now?" The question hung between them, laden with possibilities. Jake knew Alex wasn't just asking about the electrical systems. "Well," Jake began, choosing his words carefully, "we should probably report the fix to management and monitor the systems through the end of the game, just to be safe." Alex nodded, a flicker of disappointment crossing his features before Jake continued. "And after that," Jake added, finding courage he didn't know he possessed, "maybe we could grab dinner? There's a great place a few blocks from here that stays open late after games." The smile that spread across Alex's face was answer enough, but he verbalized it anyway. "I'd like that. A lot." As they made their way back through the service corridors, their hands occasionally brushing against each other, Jake reflected on the strange turns life could take. He'd woken up that morning expecting nothing more than another routine shift beneath the stadium. Yet here he was, walking beside someone who had somehow managed to illuminate the dimly lit passageways of his daily existence. Above them, the crowd erupted in a deafening roar, presumably in response to some crucial play in the game. But for once, Jake wasn't curious about what was happening in the world above. His attention was fully captured by the man walking beside him, by the promise of dinner conversation that would extend beyond transformer capacities and electrical systems, by the possibility of discovering what else they might share beyond an unexpected kiss behind a service door. By the time they emerged from the stadium's underbelly hours later, the game had ended, the crowds had dispersed, and the parking lot was nearly empty. The night air felt different somehow, charged with potential, with the excitement of new beginnings. As they walked toward the restaurant Jake had suggested, their shoulders bumping occasionally in a way that seemed both accidental and intentional, Jake realized that sometimes the most meaningful connections happen in the most unexpected places, even beneath the thundering feet of 70,000 oblivious sports fans, behind a service door held shut with his back. Total _char_count, 18,760.